When deciding for projects for these lessons and these tutorials, I kind of look for inspiration in different places. I read through the requirements. This is a perfect example of one of those kind of situations. Whenever I saw the requirements for this lesson, one of the things was to mess with the perspective and the opticals. So what I really wanted to do was create something along the lines of those photos you see of the trees that go all the way down the road, and you can see like a long distance of these trees and the perspective of them. And I wanted to play with that kind of idea and show you guys how you can create this perspective. So I'm going to do a sample project for you, and then just like, the past couple modules, you're going to find your own photos and you're going to do something that's going to show this idea of perspective. So what I did was I first went and found my images. And this image right here that you can see on my screen, this was kind of what I was thinking originally, but I wanted to take it to a Photoshop level. I wanted to play with other things and almost make it fantasy-like. So I decided instead of trees, I'm going to use sunflowers. Okay, so I'm going to come over and I'm going to, again, create a new file. Most of the time for this, I want to just um, start with a new blank slate. It just makes it easier for me, and then I don't have to worry about whether or not I'm having to delete or remove things that I don't want from the beginning. I can add in whatever I want. So again, I'm just going to do an 8.5 by 11, and I do want this one to be up and down this time because the image I'm starting with is a portrait mode image. So I'm going to hit I'm going to type in lesson 5 up here and create this new document. Close that. Okay, for this image, what I wanted to start off with, you're going to find your own images. I'm not going to give you a set list of images that you're going to need because I really want you to be creative and try and find something that you can create with perspective that's a little different, okay? So I'm going to come into here, and what I have is I have a flower, I have this road, I have a sky, and I have somebody walking. So I'm going to select those four. You do not have to make your choices on what images you want to work with until after you see my finished assignment so that you can kind of start from there. Now, if you want to mimic kind of my assignment and find images that kind of go along with this, feel free to do that too. So I'm going to start with this road. So this is going to be my first image that I'm going to use. As always, Control A, Control C, and I'm going to paste it into this new document and size it. Now, this image is pretty high quality, so if I wanted to start with this image, I could have. I'm just trying to get you in the practice of kind of starting with a clean slate, but if you want to start with your background image, feel free. Okay, so this is my background image. One of the things that's on this week's to look at list is to how to make adjustments to the image itself. So with this image, I really like the depth in this image right in here and up in the sky, but over here in the mountains, it gets a little light for me. So one of the things you can do is you can always make adjustments to an image. Now there's a couple different ways of doing this. The first way is going to be a more destructive way. So it's going to actually alter the image itself, but you can come up to image and adjustments. Up here, you can adjust brightness and contrast. You can adjust levels, curves, exposure. So exposure would be like if you were taking a photograph and you wanted to adjust the actual exposure of it. Brightness and contrast. Overall, this image isn't super bright. It's only in that one area. So brightness and contrast is going to mess with the overall brightness and brightness of this. So that's not really right either. So I'm going to go for levels. With levels, it allows you to adjust all the way through your value scale. So anything in the middle is going to be right in here, dark and light. Now, like I said, if I do it this way, it's going to end up affecting my entire project. I can't go back and fix this. So doing your adjustments this way, just know it's permanent. I'm going to show you a little bit better of a way. I know that we go over this again in a couple lessons, but The problem with teaching Photoshop is the fact that you can't just do just one thing. A lot of times you want to be able to overlap these different techniques and tools. So I'm going to kind of hop around sometimes. So I'm going to hit cancel here, and I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to come to this little black and white circle at the bottom of the layers panel, and I'm going to click on it. And I'm going to find layers or find levels in there, and I'm going to select it. Now you'll see you have an adjustment layer right here. So again, another type of layer that you can have in your layer panel. With the adjustment layer, if I ended up not liking it, I could turn it off. Or if I ended up not liking the way it looked, I could make adjustments to it. So this doesn't permanently alter this layer right here. So it's just a good option. All of the adjustment layers that we will go through are all like that. So now I can come up here and I can push my blacks to black if I want it to. I can push my whites to white if I want to. And I can also make adjustments to those middle areas. And so I'm going to tone down that a little bit, and I'm going to push my black back up a little bit just so it evens out. I just want those mountains were so blown out. I didn't like that. So I wanted to be able to adjust them just a little bit. Now, in a couple lessons, I'm going to show you how to create mask, and we could actually adjust only the mountains if we want to, and nothing else would be affected. But for right now, this kind of gives me that effect that I'm looking for, where it darkened up the mountains a little bit, and it made the whole overall thing a little more contrasty, a little more moody, which is what I was looking for. Okay, the next thing I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you grab your object that you're going to throw into perspective, and I'm going to do a Control A and a Control C and a Control V and paste this on here. Now, what I'm thinking for this assignment for you guys is that everybody did this assignment at some point in elementary or middle school where you had to draw the street just like I have here. And then you had to draw the buildings going down it in perspective. That's exactly what I'm thinking. If you don't want to use a street, you could use a river, or maybe you can find a box at this perspective or something that just kind of shows that going away, that 1 point perspective, kind of like you did in elementary school. So you're going to start with that, and then you're going to have an object, and instead of having buildings, we'll just have, for mine, we'll have sunflowers. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to grab my magic wand tool. One of the nice things about this being on all black is that I can use my magic wand tool and I can select the background. Now, my tolerance is up pretty high, so it selected even parts of the flower. I don't want that, so I'm going to take my tolerance down at the top on the option bar down to about 35. 35 is a nice base number for this. And then when I click on it, you're going to see it selected even less. So now all I have to do is come back, and I'm going to grab my quick selection tool and kind of pick up, oops, I'm going to have to take away from the selection. So press my Alt key, and then I can kind of come in here and select some of this area. Now, if I wanted to, I could get up between that flower a little bit better. There we go. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm not wild about these little leaves right here, so I'm going to get rid of some of this. Okay, so you can be as picky as you want. There we go, and kind of go back and forth and get it to where you want it. Now, again, I'm going to just erase the background part that I don't want. It's already selected, so all I have to do is hit delete, and I have my nice, pretty little sunflower here. You can see that I missed just a little bit over here, so I'm just going to grab my eraser tool and clean up the edges a little bit in case there's any. Again, you can close these, and you can see just the flower. My flower has a little bit down here that didn't get picked, and a little bit right here that didn't get picked. So I'm going to go ahead and erase those with just an eraser tool. Okay, open those back up. Now we got our cleanup done. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this flower, and I want 3 flowers to kind of come up over the road like the trees do. So I'm going to copy it 3 times. And then I'm going to kind of shift them over from each other. But I want them to stay on the same kind of plane right here. So I can press and hold Shift, and I can move them over. And I'm going to have them go, I want this one in front and then this one and then this one. So this is the furthest one away from me and kind of tucked behind each one. So I'm just going to layer these three the way I want them. And I can see my distance between them is a little off. So I'm going to kind of eyeball it and put the distance to be the same. So between the stems. Again, this is me getting extremely picky. Feel free if you wanted them to have, 20 and you wanted them all different spacing, all that type of stuff. You can play with this as much as you want. Okay, so I'm going to press the top. I'm going to click on layer 2 on the top and I'm press hold shift. I'm going to click copy on the bottom and I'm going to turn these into one layer. I always suggest before you do something like this that if you're going to make it permanent and make them into one layer, that you just kind of make a copy of one of them just in case anything goes wrong. You don't have to go back and redo that step we just did. And you can delete this one later once you know that everything is perfect the way you want it. So I'm going to press and hold shift and I'm going to click the three that I want. I close the one that I want to keep as my backup. I'm going to come over to these lines and I'm going to merge the layers. So you have three options here. The first one is merge layers. Whatever you have selected, it'll merge. You can merge visible, so it would merge everything except for that one that we closed, or you can flatten and that just automatically does everything and tosses out the stuff you have closed. So we're just going to do merge layers. Okay, so now these are one layer. Now we need to mess with the perspective and I need to make them so that they fade back along this road. Fade probably isn't the right word, so that they go back along the road at that perspective so that you get that 1 point perspective feel to them so they get smaller as they go away from us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this one right here at the edge, this very first one right where I want them to start. And I'm going to come up to edit, transform, and perspective. So right in here is where you're going to find a lot of those things that we use Control T, which is just the like free form. It's right here, free transform, so we can do them. If you want to be able to do a few extra things, then you're going to come in here. This is where you can scale, you can rotate, which is what we can already do, but you can also skew and distort and perspective. Warp is kind of nice if you want to like add a little bend to something. So let's say you're designing a pair of shoes and you design the front of the shoes, but you want them to have that natural kind of curve that the shoe would have. You can do that there. You can also rotate down here at set measurements. You can also flip horizontal and vertical, which we're going to do in just a little bit. So we're going to choose perspective. Now, by pushing the anchor points, we can move these at the perspective we need them to move. So I'm going to get these nice and straight and kind of move this back over, and you can see I'm not quite up to the perspective that I want it to be. I want it more like this, so it kind of follows the perspective of the road. I can pull this down. Go. And if you want to shrink them in a little bit, you can shrink in two sides. There we go. Mine was leaning just slightly. There we go. So now it kind of goes along the line of the road. I'm going to move them back onto the grass. Just going to change that perspective just a smidge. And there we go. And then I hit my little check mark and I have my nice little, oops, nice little sunflowers leading back. And you can kind of put them up against the road, or I'm going to have mine just slightly off the road. Again, you can also use your up and down arrows to move things just at small amounts, which comes in handy at times. Now I want to copy the same thing onto the other side of the road. So I'm going to select this layer. I'm going to go ahead and rename this flowers. Actually, I'm going to name it left flowers. Because remember, if we get too many layers, it gets confusing. So I'm going to name it left flowers. I'm going to drag it down onto the square with the plus sign. Double click on this one now and name it right flowers. We're going to have these flowers do the same thing, but on the other side of the road. So I'm going to make sure that layer is selected, come up to edit, transform, and I'm going to flip it horizontally. And it's just going to make my flowers go backwards, and I can pull them over here. Now, if you need to adjust your perspective a little bit, you can do that, make them so that they make sense. Feel free. Now, I do want to do one more thing. I want to add a sky to this. The sky is kind of boring in my opinion, so I want to add a new sky to it. So I'm going to take my background, I'm going to close my flowers, and I'm going to select my background layer. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to find my sky that I chose, which is right here, and do Control A and Control C and Control V, and I'm going to have it paste it right in front of that background layer. T, I can size this down. Again, remember, use your opacity if you need to, so you can see. There we go. So I have my sky back here. And my opacity is kind of thrown out. That's okay. But what I want to do is I want to select this ground and these mountains. So I'm going to use my quick selection tool, make sure I'm on the right layer. And I'm going to select this area. Now I probably don't have to go all the way down because of the fact that my sky isn't covering all the way down. Doesn't matter. I'm going to come up back up to my layer 3 and I'm going to delete. Do Control D. Now I have this really dramatic sky and I can open it back up. But my sky is so much darker than my mountains. I'm going to leave my opacity down a little bit, but I do want those mountains to kind of show. Okay. Now, another thing you can do is if you really wanted that sky to kind of like have the same feel as that original image, you can make a copy of it, drag it up above the sky, or up above our new sky layer, and you can do one of those you can do one of these blend modes over it. So now that kind of like messes with my mountains a little bit too, or, you know, if I want it to be really dramatic and have that sunspot. So it's just another way of kind of playing with these blend modes. It's up to you what you do and how far you take this. If you want to try that, try it. You can also, again, mess with the opacity and it kind of gives it another level. So then there's our flowers on top of it. So it doesn't make, if I don't do that, my mountains are just standing way too out for me. So okay, so I'm going to add those sunflowers back in. Now I want to put a little person walking away in the middle. So I found this image right here of this gentleman walking away. I'm going to go ahead and Control A and Control C to copy it. And then Control V to paste it in. T, downsize it a little bit. And I do want him to feel like almost like a little bitty miniature person walking through these. So I'm going to kind of add this in right here. Whoops, there we go. Now, this one needs to be dragged to the top so my flowers aren't in my way. And again, you can use your object selection tool. You can use your quick select tool. You're going to select out this aspect of it. Remember, Alt will help you take things away. I'm going to kind of come over this right here, just so I don't have that weird cord right there. And there we go. So now I'm again going to select an inverse, hit delete, and now I have him walking away from us. And you can Control T and size it to however you want. There we go. Okay, so now we have this kind of perspective feel, not only with the road, which was the original photo, but you know, we have him feeling like he's walking away from us with these giant flowers and everything as well. The other thing that I wanted you to take a look at today was some of the blur options. So we're going to make this feel almost dreamlike with a blur. One of the ways you can do this on individual. We're going to end up doing it on an individual layer. But if we come here and we do this on layer 4 and we add this filter to it. Oops, wrong one. What it's going to do is it's going to kick us only into that mode, which is fine, but at the same time, I want to be able to see more of what I'm doing. So I'm going to press and hold Control, Shift, Alt, and the letter E. Control, Shift, Alt, and the letter E. And now you'll see that it flattened that into one image without disturbing any of the stuff we've already done. Okay, so now with this with your new layer selected, we can come up here to the filter gallery and we can add a blur to it. So I'm going to do the filter gallery. I'm going to do iris blur. And I want you to play with a couple of those. So if you don't want to do iris, I'm going to show you what it does. Blur gallery, it has a field blur. The tilt shift blur causes that kind of effect. Like all of you have seen like where they make a video of something and the cars look like toy cars driving down a street, but it's a real street. That one's up here. You can do a blur on a path, or you can make it spin. It doesn't physically spin, but it makes it look like you were spinning and you caught that blur. With iris blur, though, it's going to we're going to be able to pick what we want the focus to be on. And I want the focus to be on the person walking away, and I want everything else to kind of focus out. Now, you can have lots of control over this. So if you pull the circle in and out, you're going to control where it's going to stay in focus and where it's not going to be in focus, or the shape of it. You can pull here, and this is how fast or how slow that blur affects. You can see it a lot in my road as I go, that little white line down there, how much of it's blurring. You can also go right here, and by pressing this and turning it, you can tell it how much you want it to focus. So if you want to throw it out of focus more or less. So I'm going to go right about there and then hit OK. And it's going to add that effect to it. So it feels almost like we're focusing strictly in on the person, and everything else is kind of getting that dreamlike out of focus feel to it. Okay, so I want you to, for this assignment, I want you to create perspective. I want you to play with the blur gallery, kind of play with those things, see what you can come up with. Again, if you're having a hard time and you're feeling a little bit of an artist blockage, feel free to kind of mimic what I did, find your own images and kind of mimic something like this. Or if you want to go out and be creative and you have an idea, and as long as it shows perspective and you play with that filter, add a couple different images together, perfect. Have some fun with it. Shoot me an email if you're having any problems, or if you need some help or have a question, and we'll try and get you some answers. Otherwise, just enjoy.